Alrighty guys, sorry about that. My timer ran out on my Screencast-O-Matic, which is what I use to record these videos. But we just have a few slides left to get into to wrap up this lesson for the day. So again, like I was saying before, sometimes if they want you to show both sides of an argument, they may ask you to kind of take the perspective of each side. So this example that they provide is describe one incentive that the government of a country could offer its citizens that would favor a reduction in the growth rate of its population. Explain how this incentive would work and describe one possible drawback. So two sides of the same coin. So they're looking for you to play the devil's advocate. So an example of this would be like China's one-child or now two-child policy. So you would say a benefit of this is that you would, get a reduction in your overall population. There would be less, strain on infrastructure, etc. But then a drawback, like unintentional consequences, would be like what we saw with, infanticide of females because, Chinese family really wanted a male to carry on family name. So you would just have to provide evidence for both sides of the argument. Always go with the most obvious answer. So you don't get extra points for looking like you know more than the average Joe. The simple, correct answer is the one you should go with because it's probably going to be the one that you can explain the best. If you don't know a law, so if it's asking for something in particular or if it's asking for specific examples, you can always fall back on some easy ones. So Endangered Species Act, Clean Air Act, or the Clean Water Act. Usually those can work to support your answer no matter what you're really looking at because they encompass so much and they're so broad. Just make sure you review those before you go into your AP test. Graphing is important because in some instances you can be asked to make a graph here with what's going on now. I doubt you'll be asked to graph, but you might have to read one. Okay. So if you have to read one or explain how you would maybe present your data for an experimental design, this is just a good review. So graphs always need a title. Your independent variable, remember the independent is the thing that you change about the experiment. That goes along the x, so the horizontal. Your dependent goes along the y, right? So your dependent is what changes in response to the independent variable. You need to label each axis and give the appropriate units. So if you're reading a graph, make sure you understand what units are there. The increments will be proportional. Plot the points and sketch a curve if needed. Typically, they would tell you whether or not you needed to connect the points. And then label each curve if you plot more than one. Okay, so here my thought would be that you guys will be interpreting a graph more likely than having to make one yourself. And then finally, here is the big one, the experimental design. You guys are going to be writing this. This is the one that you're going to have 25 minutes on. It's going to take a lot of time because when you set up an experiment, there's a lot involved. Make sure you know this slide. Make sure you understand everything that goes into that experimental design process. Okay? So when you're writing an FRQ on an experimental design, you're going to first describe the expected outcomes, state the hypothesis. It has to be testable. These experiments that you come up with have to be reasonable. Okay? If you come up with something off the wall, you're not going to get any points. So make sure you state what your hypothesis is, typically as an if-then statement. All right, and it has to be something that can be tested by a scientist. Make sure your design is possible and consistent with what is required. Make sure if you are, designing an experiment, it's actually going to help you answer the question that they've provided to you. Specify the independent variable, the dependent variable, the constants, and the control. You need all four. All right. You have to make sure you know, and if we need to review independent versus dependent variable, we can. Describe how you're going to collect your data, how you're going to graph and analyze it. All right, that's where that graphing slide comes into play. Even averaging data can be considered an analysis. Remember, you guys did this, kind of did this with our air pollution experiments. Right? You guys collected data about air pollution. You guys put your data together. That was kind of, we were working with what we had at the moment. Some of it didn't go too well for, varying reasons, but it showed you the process of setting up an experiment and designing an experiment and collecting data. You have the advantage here that you kind of just get to make it up in your head. You don't actually have to perform it. So here you just have the opportunity to best case scenario it. So if everything was perfect, you had access to everything you needed, you could collect your data and display it in something appropriate, what would you do? State how you would draw your conclusions. So a lot of times that when you're drawing conclusions, when you're describing it, you would be looking at your results. Okay, so you would say conclusions would be made based on analyzing the results, of my experiment, and you would talk about how you had collected and analyzed your data. And then finally, you're going to indicate how you're going to repeat the experiment. Remember, good experiments are repeatable. They are testable. So you have to verify the results. So at the end, you would say, to verify results, my experiment would be repeated, and then you could even come up with your specific number. Always state more trials will be conducted. Give a number, anything over 50. Okay, so you could say, trials will be repeated 100 more times to verify accuracy of results. And that'll definitely get you some points. This right here, if you can do this, all right, granted, you understand the content that we're reviewing, this is 60% of your exam right here, all right? This is why I'm telling you guys, you've got a really great chance at getting some college credit, all right? Because if you can do this, you can be successful. Okay, so that's it. I'm sorry that the video ran a little bit over, but it's all good. You guys have a assignment for today. It's just a checkup. It's basically just going through and answering questions to make sure that you watch this presentation and that you know what's expected of your FRQs moving forward. So go ahead and go take that. I don't think that I put a time limit on it. You can only take it once, so there's not more than one attempt. And that will be due on Tuesday night by 11:59 p.m. Your spring break is rapidly approaching. You guys are not going to be responsible for anything over spring break, but I highly encourage you to continue to just look at that College Board YouTube channel to watch some review videos and start looking at your notes because May 18th is going to be here quicker than you realize. All right, guys, so I hope y'all have a great day. If you have any questions, let me know.